Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations was brought to you by Dead Reckoning Rum, creating individual rum releases commemorating the diggers lost in Afghanistan, proudly supporting veterans, donating 50% of all their profits to veterans organisations around Australia. Look up Dead Reckoning Rum, buy some bottles, connect via Instagram and Facebook and give them your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today I'm joined by a good friend of mine actually, and we've been setting this podcast up for a long time now. We've finally managed to get the schedules together to where we could actually record this podcast, and we are recording in a very special place, and the veteran I have on today is still currently serving, is 27 years in the Australian Defence Force and has deployed on multiple operations around the world, and he does so much for veterans and first responders and other projects that he's involved in. And today I'm joined by Jonathan Finch, and it is an absolute privilege to have him on. So, Jono, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam, mate. Yeah, really appreciative that you could get me on here. So we're in the Newcastle Club at the moment, and in specifically the Anzac Lounge of the Newcastle Club. And if you have a look around the room, you can just see what distinguished members this club has had in the past. And there's hundreds of names on the panels here in brass, and they're the members all the way from the First World War through to current operation. And yeah, hundreds of members and staff that have served, and many have died overseas. But yeah, just looking around the room,
it's this place, special.
Yeah, the history in this place and of another club that's just down the road that you'll be visiting soon, called the United Service Club. It's all just builds part of that picture of Newcastle of having a really great military history, and yeah, it's a great place to live too, especially as a veteran. Yeah.
Well, mate, we'll get into your career in a minute, and we just went up to the beautiful cathedral where you showed me Clarence Jeffrey's Victoria Cross that's on display. We went into the World War One memorial,
the Warriors Chapel there.
Warriors Chapel, and mate, it's beautiful. There's so much history attached to Newcastle.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, up in the cathedral there, I showed you the Book of Gold, and
correct.
That is, after World War One, they wanted to do something to remember all the people who died from the parishes. So all the widows donated their wedding rings, and they had so much gold left over that they were able to craft a chalice. But yeah, it's just, when you see those names there, you just see how much this area lost. Yeah, how I ended up becoming involved here is I had someone come in when I was in recruiting here in Newcastle, a Brigadier Spike Milligan, and just invited me into the United Service Club one day, and so I went in there and had lunch there, and the food was horrible, and I sat on that for a little while, and I went away for a year, and then I said to my wife, I said, when we get back to Newcastle, I think I'll join there as a member. So I went there again for lunch, and I said, look, if you ever need a new cook, just let me know. And they'd had the same cook there forever, And about 2 weeks later, they said, "Oh, the cook's crook, she's not coming back." So I ended up very quickly fitting into there, and each Thursday it was cooking for a whole heap of World War II vets, and just to be able to sit down with them and like some of the people that were there, like Dr. Peter Hendry, who just saved hundreds and hundreds of lives on the Thai-Burma Railway. Jeff Robinson, 300 combat hours in a Spitfire when the average life expectancy of a Spitfire pilot was 16 hours. Howard Williams, Noel Harrison was with Sir Odin Cutler when he got the Victoria Cross.
Wow.
And just the stories every day, or every Thursday, just being able to sit down with those old fellas and have lunch, and it was just a part of life. I realised if I don't take the time now to hear their stories, then they're going to be gone forever. And yeah, unfortunately, podcasts weren't a thing then, Adam. But yeah, some of those stories were fantastic.
Oh, mate, it's, as I say, this doesn't feel like work. I get to sit with all of you guys and meet amazing veterans, amazing first responders, and inspirational people that have even done things that I've got a podcast coming up that is, she's a world record holder. She kayaked around Australia in a kayak and in 8 months, and croc infested waters, sharks, and it's just like, there's amazing human beings that are in this around the world, and mate, I've got the best job in the world. I get to sit and talk to you guys. So yeah, and capture these stories. We were talking off air. A couple of the podcasts that I've recorded are no longer with us, so they're even extra special now for their families because they're recorded for history.
Yep.
And that's what it's all about. And, mate, before we get into your career, let's go back to a young Finchy. Talk me through life growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up local to Newcastle, Birmingham Gardens, so it's one of the suburbs that's just near the university. A very white picket fence family. My mum and dad had 2 kids, boy and a girl, actual white picket fence. They didn't drink, smoke, swear, gamble. We went to church on Sundays. So it was a very good upbringing. Like, my parents both worked very hard. Like, I remember at one stage my dad was working at the Commonwealth Bank Monday to Friday. He would finish work at the bank, then go and do another 6 hours at an engineering firm. At the same time, he was studying at uni, and then on weekends he was fixing people's cars. But, so my family worked hard to be able to provide that upbringing that we did get. So, yeah, I'll always be really appreciative of the effort that my parents put in, and the sacrifices that they made to allow both my sister and I to get a good education and a good childhood. So
it seems to be, and I know now, you're a father yourself, so you know what the sacrifice is of that. Like, I know my parents, they went without just to provide for us, and you don't appreciate it until you get to an age where, like, I know now I look back and I just think the sacrifices that mum and dad made were like, they just did it. It just seemed to be that's what you did. Like, and you know it now. You sacrifice to do things for your kids, and because you want to give them the best opportunities that they can then go forward in their life. And
100%, mate.
You took that yourself.
It's a bit of a fine balance, though. It's something that both my wife and I struggle with. Is that balance between giving your child the best opportunities, but also building resilience. It's super hard. That's probably the most challenging thing that we find as parents, is how to build resilience, but at the same time set your kids up and make sure they're good humans.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because do you find, like, when you were growing up, that compared to now, you're more resilient than what the kids are today?
Yeah, look, I mean, I can see the frustrations that my son has sometimes, and I had those same frustrations, and I'm sure I certainly caused my parents a few frustrations as well. But, I think it was definitely a lot more resilient as kids, because you weren't at home. Like, as you did, mate, you're out riding your BMX, and back by the time the streetlights were on, I remember one day I I'd always thought, 5 o'clock, that's when the street lights come on. But this was the middle of summer, didn't have a watch, get home at 8:30 at night. My parents were like, where have you been? Yeah. But no, you're just outside a lot more and doing things like falling off your bike and actually hurting yourself.
Cutting yourself.
All that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and back then too, like I reflect on it now, mate, that I don't know how we didn't die, because we were up stormwater drains, we were swinging rope swings off cliffs, and and just, you sit there and you think, and there was no fear, and I know as a kid, like, we just did everything, the old phone box was around that you'd 1-800 reverse back to, so the charge would go back to who you were ringing, but it was
too scared to do that.
It's now, mate. Now there's no phone boxes anymore, and now, as you say, you're in the bush. You're playing army, and you're playing touch football, building jumps, building cubby houses, all that stuff that today kids don't. I think. Mate, I was the last of that generation that had a ball growing up. That was awesome. The late 90s, early 2000s was in. Yeah. And because technology was starting when I was going into my teenage years, it was sort of on the cusp mid-2000s, and then it really took off post-2010 onwards, and now kids today. But anyway, that's a rabbit hole. But, mate, what were you like at school? Were you pretty good?
Yeah. So one of my aunties, who's a school teacher, said that the really hyperactive kids never take a day off school. So that was me. I was I found it difficult to focus a lot of the time. However, I did do very well. Like in high school, I think I came first in all my classes, maybe third in maths and third in English and middle of the class in math. But I achieved fairly good results at school, but just studying wasn't for me. But anything practical, anything hands-on, I was pretty good at.
Were you pretty sporty as well?
I played soccer for 9 years, but I wouldn't
good
say...
Sport, mate.
I wouldn't say I was the best soccer player, but I stuck with it. And
what position did you play?
I was goalkeeper for a few years, played fullback, I played on the wing, so basically all the positions where you put the average players, mate.
Hey, mate, I was a left fullback, mate. Mate, I always say strikers were the glory boys that would score goals, and we would stop the goals. So, so, mate, did you have any family members that served in the ADF, or were you the first?
Yeah, so my grandfather did about 20 years in the CMF. He was not back for the army in World War II because he was underage, and then he went into the railways. And as you know, railways is one of the protected industries. Mm-hmm. So if you went into the railways, then you couldn't leave the railways to join the army. But then, maybe 10 years after the war had finished, he joined the CMF, which is the same as the Army Reserves. Did 20 years or so in the Army Reserve, and probably his claim to fame was he was promoted by Sir Odin Cutler.
Wow.
And he also laid up the colours of the 2nd Battalion Royal New South Wales, which we just looked at next door in the cathedral. So.
Yeah, right. So...
I've got a few more as well.
Yeah, of course, mate, yeah.
Well, so my Uncle Alf, so I used to often go to his farm for holidays up in Mitchell's Island, which is near Taree, and he was in the Navy, and although he served in Korea, probably the more defining moments for him were he was in all the nuclear testing that occurred in the Pacific.
Yeah, right.
And then in Maralinga.
I was about to say Maralinga, yeah.
So I remember him telling me stories about they basically were just given a pair of white rubber boots. They had a pair of stubby shorts on, no shirt. And they were given a pair of gloves that were very similar to washing up gloves. And, at Maralinga, he told me that they said, look, don't look directly at the explosion. So they just covered their eyes with their hands. And he said, as it came through, you could see the X-ray of your hands. So,
wow.
Yeah, so he was at a significant number of those nuclear tests. Mm. And he was also one of the last surviving people that were at those nuclear tests. Obviously, a lot of them died from cancer. Fortunately, he didn't, but whether or not that something passed on to the family after that. It's hard to know. But funnily enough, because he used to say to me, he goes, "Don't ever join the Navy. You bloke like you will always be peeling potatoes," because he'd show me how to do something, and then I'd just go, "Okay, yeah, I think I can do it this way."
Yeah.
And as we get into my career, you'll find why that is.
Right.
Because it kind of came true. But also had a great uncle in World War One that I did a lot of research on before we went over to the battlefields and went to Bullecourt and Villers-Bretonneux and all those. And I initially thought that he was killed in Bullecourt, and the barracks here in Newcastle is called Bullecourt Barracks. So I was interested to see that, but as I kind of dug a bit deeper, even though there was a witness statement saying, yes, I saw him get killed here, or I saw his grave here, and I found the exact spot in Bullecourt, he wrote a letter home about 3 days later. So,
right.
So that then proved that was an incorrect statement, and then he was killed in the Battle of Messines.
Yes.
And someone else had said, look, he was in the trench next to me, and it was a direct hit by artillery. And so, yeah, when we were over there, we did quite a few nights at Menin Gate, as you have done too, mate.
It's for the non-military listener, if you ever get a chance to go over there, it's one thing to read it in a book, isn't it, mate? It's another thing to actually walk that ground and walk in those cemeteries and actually see the scale of the devastation. Yeah. And, when you go to Tynecott Cemetery and there's 12,000, or just nearly 12,000 graves, and you see the blockhouses, and you see Sergeant McGee, Victoria Cross, Clarence Jeffrey, who we just spoke about, and all the other... and how flat Flanders is. Like, you don't... And I know myself, mate, I've been to a number of last post services in the War Memorial in Canberra. That it's special, but it is something else. Actually, standing at the Menin Gate, standing under 54,000 names to the missing, just in that area alone in Ypres, and Ypres was absolutely destroyed. It's something special, isn't it?
Mate, just a quick sidebar.
Of course.
I walked through a field just to have a look at one of the small cemeteries there. I stepped over the stone fence and I looked down, and the first headstone I saw, and I can't remember his name, sorry, but VC with bar.
Oh, that is. I know Chevelle. No, not Chevelle. Oh, I know who you're talking about. I know he's the only man in the Great... Noel Chavasse. Yeah. He's the only man in the Great War to achieve 2 Victoria Crosses. Yeah. And I know that cemetery that you're talking about, and I've been to that grave as well. And it is you sit there and just, wow, that's just bravery, and it's, and what he did, and he was in the medical corps. Yeah. So just amazing human. And it's a very special place, mate. It really is something that, Yeah,
also got a few cousins that joined after me. So my cousin Brent went into the infantry, James went into the pay corps, Sam went into Cav, Lisa went in as a clerk, and before becoming a medical officer in defence. Like all in the reserves. And I mean, she would have done 20 years now, and that's a massive achievement when you're juggling work and 4 kids as a doctor. It's that dedication of time, and that's what I actually have come to really appreciate, that long service medal. It's 15 years of missing birthdays and wedding anniversaries and kids' birthdays and everything else like that. There's a lot of sacrifice. And of course, my wife is also in defence. She's a nursing officer and midwife in the Air Force, and again, she's done over 20 years.
It is, mate. It's so you come from a long lineage of service, and especially, and so what was that one of the main reasons that drew you to joining in 1999?
It was a bit of a strange situation while I joined. I never had any intention of joining the army. I had my own joiners workshop from when I was about 15 years old, and I had a lot of jobs. Like, my first day at work was when I was 9 years old. I started working at a butcher's shop, and that same day was the same day as the Newcastle earthquake, and I've had so many jobs, like as a young fella, and people would always say, "Oh, mate, do you want a job doing this? Do you want a job doing that?" Because they could see when you work. Like, you're not a bludger. Like, you put in, you work hard, and I think people recognise that, especially if you're a business owner. You can see someone who's putting in, then, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's, I often say this to younger people too, it might not be where you want to be right now, but do the job, because you never know who's watching. Yeah, so you could, 100%. A millionaire could be watching, or a billionaire, and going, wow, I like your work ethic, son. Do you want to come and work for me? You just never know. And the thing that I always live by is that the job you do now is setting you up for in 20 years' time. Yeah. You don't know where you'll be or what you'll be doing, but do the best to your ability that you can, and just have a good work ethic, turn up on time and do your job, and and that's what it's about. So you work hard, mate, and so
I will get back. Sorry, I took a bit of a turn there, but I applied for a job in Newcastle, and up until then, everyone had always offered me jobs, so I'd never actually been to a job interview. So, and just in hindsight, I just remember looking at my resume a few years later and just, hey, that's bloody chicken scrawl. Marks were there, but, I just hadn't presented it well. And I went in for a job, because there was only two places I actually wanted to work for in Newcastle, and they're both fine cabinetry places. And one hired an apprentice every second year, and it was the off year. And the other one, someone who'd worked there for over 20 years. His son was also a brilliant joiner, so for his age, and he ended up it was just a straight offer, and as it should have been. So I applied for a job as a carpenter in town, and my dad took me in, dropped me off, walked in, and came back out, and he's like, how'd that go? And I said, I don't think I got that. And then right across the road was Defence Force recruiting. So I never even considered it. I just looked across the road and just walked over there, and just went in there. I said, thinking about joining. And he's like, full-time or part-time? And I was like, better see if I like it first. I'll go part-time, and just offered me all these jobs, and I didn't even know what most of the jobs were. And so things like ammunition technician and all those kind of things. And he goes, do you want to be an officer or an OR? And I was like, what's that? So I had to explain to him. I said, I think I'll be an OR. And
that'll change.
Yeah, that'll change. But I just was like, chef. I was like, cook. Yeah, I'll do be a cook. And he's like, you sure? And I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I? He's like, oh, no, there's nothing wrong with it. But, like a lot of young fellas fit like you just tend to go to infantry. I was like, what's infantry do? I had no idea. And and I was like, straight away, though, I was already assessing what qualifications and what life skills I would get from each of these jobs. And I looked at infantry, I was like, I can't see any transferable skills. So straight away I was like, well, yeah, I like cooking. So I ended up signing on the dotted line as a cook.
Yeah, right. And that back then, 1999, mate, was very different to how we are in 2025. Talk me through the process of, you went down to Kapuka. What was that like back in 1999?
Yeah, so I've been in defence at times when the time you go into Defence Force recruiting to the time you actually get accepted, sometimes that's 6 months. Or I think I went in the start of December, and then they said to me, you start on the 3rd of January. So 3rd of January, there was a bus came and picked up two bus loads of people from Newcastle. We all went down for testing in Sydney. So it was the pre-enlistment fitness test, psychometric testing, all that kind of stuff. They put you in a hotel overnight in the Cross, which was
probably not a great place to push us all.
Yeah, but I mean, at the time they said don't go out, and I just didn't. But my roommate did, and he didn't turn up the next day, so I never saw him again. And just went down there, and I remember, it all being very jovial and everyone kind of laughing on the bus the next day as we drove through the gate. And then bus pulls up, this MP warrant officer gets on the bus and just starts yelling. And I was like, holy smokes, this is different.
Because how old are you at this point?
18.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So still young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
Yeah, so, and he's like, has anyone got any weapons, knives, or alcohol? And I took a pocket knife with me, as I thought, oh, that'll be handy. And then my roommate, the day before, I didn't even drink. He said, oh, you need to take some alcohol with you. You'll have to buy some alcohol. So I bought a bottle of Jim Beam, even though I didn't drink.
Yeah.
Took that down, and he's like, what are you doing with this? And I was like, oh, someone else told me to bring it. At least I didn't take my golf clubs.
No, that's very true.
Yeah, I think my platoon sergeant was very glad at the end of when I marched out that I told him he could keep it. But yeah, the first few days, I was just in absolute shock when I was there. I couldn't believe you could get that many swear words in a sentence. I just remember kind of just trying to count sometimes. I was like, oh, there's more swear words in this sentence than there are other words. And then it's a swear word as a part of a word. And yeah. Yeah, it's actually just days of shock. But yeah, it's good corporals down there. I came across one of them, Corporal Boyle, so he was ex-3RAR, or was 3RAR. Came across him as a warrant officer again later in my career. Really good operator. Had a Corporal Ayub, who was a RAOC guy who'd also been to Somalia. And back then, I think this is the very start of 99. This is before... We've had 40 years of peace. Yeah. So people had done their 20, 30, even 40 years in defence and hadn't gotten a deployment. And it's, it's tough for those people. And if it's just a circumstance of the time, and you still see those guys kicking around with a long service medal. It's just from when they were in. And, another corporal was Harris, who was an MP, and another female corporal, Brady. So it was only a little while into the 45-day course that they'd made the same for full-time and part-time. I still remember Corporal Brady just yelling one day, and what did I say, Recruit Finch? And I repeated back exactly what she said. And she's like, what are you, a fucking parrot? And I was like, no, Corporal, I'm a Finch. And
that would have gone down well.
She was like, and then marched down there, shut the door, and then everyone's like, oh. So yeah, even a bit of a larrikin then. But yeah, made some good, really good friends down there that are like family to this day. My family came down to watch the march out, took photos.
For you?
Yeah, it was actually. If I can look back on my whole career, yeah, I really drank the Kool-Aid, and yeah, you're the best, and all that kind of stuff. You've achieved more in 45 days than some people achieve in their whole life. Yeah, so it was really proud. But yeah, my family took photos at the march out of the wrong guy. So we've got heaps of photos of somebody else who was about my height and also with a number 2 haircut.
Yeah, nice.
So
where do you go for? Because joining reserves. Where do you go for your initial employment? Like, where'd you post into?
Yeah, so I posted into 8 BASB at that stage, Brigade Administrative Support Battalion. So that was in Adamstown here, and at the time there was quite a lot of units. I think there was 13 units on the base here. It was mostly reservists, but I mean they still had 30, 40 full-timers posted there as well that were mostly training staff and administrative types. But from there, a little bit of time there until the next IET course, which is at HMAS Cerberus down in Victoria, so Frankston down that way. And yeah, the reserve catering course down there was, I can't remember exactly how long, but it was only a few weeks, and it was mostly focused on field training, like using all the field equipment, where if you were full-time, then I think they did 9 months at TAFE and then did that same 2-week part out field 3-week, whatever it was, to learn actually how to use all that field equipment. And so
because I know a lot of soldiers have said, mate, don't ever piss off the pay clerk or piss off the cook, so that can make your life hell.
Yeah, there wasn't too many people that but no, I always got along well with everyone. And the thing about being a cook is you might see 650 faces every meal, but they're only looking at 1 or 2 faces on the other side, so everyone remembers your name, but it's pretty hard to remember everyone else's.
Yeah, absolutely. And mate, for you actually, so not long after you enlist, in 2000 you deployed to Bougainville on
Belize.
What was your role over there, and what were you doing?
Yeah, so again, that was as a cook. But Bougainville was a bit of a peace offering for me, I think, because I'd been told so many times that I was going to Timor prior to that, and there was this woe one leading up to me going to Bougainville, and it was right at the start of Timor, and it's this crusty old woe one, Sid Bracewell, standing at the back of the Q store, sucking on a dab, and he's like, Finchy, you're going to war. And that was right at the start of Timor, and then, there was one stage there I'd left a full-time, a part-time and a casual job because I got told I was going.
Yep.
It didn't occur, so then had to go back and ask for my job back. Happened again, had to go back, ask for my job back. And then even then with Timor, with Bougainville, I was on that, and then it was about a week prior, they said, oh no, we've found someone else. I was like, no, this is not acceptable. This is what I've done. And this guy who was the Sergeant Clark, he wrote this fax back in the day, and instead of writing Sergeant Jones, his first name was Colin, and he just wrote Cole Jones. And so, it looked like Colonel Jones. So anyway, I got back onto that trip. But yeah, at the time, I was just bussing to get to Timor, and I was even considered for a long time just paying for a ticket and turning up and just seeing what would happen. But yeah, anyway, but Bougainville at the time I was there it's like an Australian-led peace monitoring group with Fiji, New Zealand and Vanuatu. For me, it was a 4-month deployment as a cook, but our good mate Dave Smith, I think you had him on.
Yes, episode 108.
Yep. Wow.
Episode 108.
Yeah. So he was also involved in what they called the ground maintenance team over there. We were there at the same time, but we weren't, but we did deployments together later. So the ground maintenance team was basically like a small team of volunteers, and would do some training in the morning and in the afternoons before and after work a few times a week, just basic unarmed combat, a lot of baton training, a lot of helicopter insertion and withdrawal training. And a lot of that was done at night, extraction drills, small boat handling, all the stuff that I really loved. And in Bougainville, we had a whole heap of team houses all around the island. So in the major town centres, there was teams of anywhere between 6 and 12. And so in all those places around Bougainville, they were working on like local peace stuff. And I guess the key point of that ground maintenance team was, if any of those team houses became compromised, is that the SAS sergeant, he'd well and truly be out now, but Kiwi was his name, he would lead it, and there was another trooper, and I think we had 4 Iroquois there at the time, but usually only 3 would be online, and we'd just fly in, chopper convoy, and we'd already had certain sites that we'd practice going to and picked out, and it was all unarmed, so there was no weapons at all over there for the Australians. So that was the plan, but thankfully we didn't need to do any of that. And Brigadier Ian Langford spoke a bit about
previous
Bougainville.
podcast.
Back in 90, I looked this one up for you, episode 95, but as he said, look, learn a bit more about Bougainville and see because they've got to vote for independence in 2027, so you never know what's going to happen with that. We might end up back there again. But yeah, one of the stories I have about being in the chopper there is I was in the first chopper, and the chopper behind, something hit the rotor blade, and so they had to do a landing, and it was a D-cell battery. They had made huge slingshot out of a conveyor belt and fired a slingshot at a battery at the chopper. So, yeah.
Ballsy.
Yeah.
Very ballsy. Yeah. Far out. And for that, mate, was that the first time you'd left Australia?
Oh, look, no. We went to New Zealand on a family holiday, but pretty well, yeah, it was. Is
that because I know Bougainville is very different to Australia, and did you come back with a greater appreciation of home, like being back in Australia, and the comforts that we take for granted over here?
Absolutely. I I really liked Bougainville. I went back there on holidays a couple of years later.
Yeah, right.
Even why they still had the peace monitoring group there.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, I really liked it. I spent as much time in the local villages that I could. Rolvana. Went to church every Sunday at Arawa. So, and just really worked hard to, assimilate and get the most out of it. I had a good commander over there. He's ex-CO, SASR from memory. Brigadier Mike Silverstone. I think he was the CO during the chopper crash. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was a really good trip. And, I was pretty fast at the time, and I did a BFA over there, and I had about 500 or 600 metres to go, and this lanky bloke just strides past me at about 600 to go, and I was like, there's no way he's beating me. But I put in a bit of extra gas for another 50 to 100 metres, but I couldn't keep up with him.
Yeah, right.
He was an absolute machine, and gentleman. I still got a birthday card he wrote me.
Oh, yeah right. So, mate, you come back from that trip, and your first trip of, your first deployment throughout your 27 years that's still continuing now. So first trip, and not long after that, in 2001, you spent 6 months in Yarralin, Northern Territory. What were you doing there?
Yeah, so the Army does these programs called ACAPT, which is the Army Aboriginal Community Assistance Program. It's a joint initiative with the National Indigenous Australians Agency. Mm-hmm. So basically, every year for the last 28 years, they go to a different location throughout Australia, and generally very remote communities. And so the two that I've been involved in were Yarralin, which is, it's between Top Springs and Timber Creek in Northern Territory. It's 700 k's south of Darwin, so it's in the middle of nowhere. Catherine's the closest town, 5 hours away. The other one I did was in 2007, which is in Doomadgee. And Doomadgee is on the Queensland side of the border, up in the Gulf of Carpentaria. And again, very remote, and about 300 k's west of Normanton. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of planning and consultation that goes before they pick which communities they go to, and that's all done, a year or two in advance. But from the deliverables end, by the time it gets to the pointy end, the Army does a lot of construction, which could be housing or community infrastructure, things like health facilities, community centres, public toilets. One of them, we did a upgrade to a runway, a lot of roadworks, like some of them hundreds of kilometres of roadworks because all the roads are dirt. So just being able to keep communities accessible is a big thing.
And having your trade as being a jointer would have come in handy?
That's not my trade. But yeah, I'd always had that workshop at home, so I liked doing that. But mate, I was stuck in the kitchen for that.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that it does is, we used to run courses like where there was a food handling course or welding to teach the locals, some skills. And there's always been a health aspect as well, which covers all health things, including dental and veterinarian stuff as well. Vets go up, might look at, some of those communities might have 200 or 300 dogs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that they look at. But what the Army gains from that, though, is it's practice the force project into a remote area and just maintenance of logistics and develop the trade skills, because you've got all these tradies in defence, and these days in defence you don't do any trade stuff around the base. That's all contracted out. So it's just that hands-on time and from scratch. But yeah, it's awesome to get out into those parts of Australia, but it's a pretty hard slog in some very difficult environments. And if you've got, young family men there or women, to ask them to go away for 4 to 6 months at a time every year or every second year, it's a pretty big ask. So yeah, a lot of those tradies from 17 construction and 21 construction, and I think 3CR was the other one at the time. Plenty of time out there, and it was worth it though. I mean, the second trip that I did was Doomadgee. I'd only been married for 2 weeks, I think, and away for 4 months. And then at Yarralin, I had my 21st birthday out there. I was out in the dust for 6 months, and I'd had a 21-year-old Boliv Shivers Regal that was given to me for my 21st birthday, and again I took that not knowing it was a dry community. So we get to the gate, and that had to get tipped out on the ground as we went through. But anyway, it's all part of it.
And how are you with work? How are you fitting in your army time with work and maintaining a career?
Yeah, so I had a really good boss who, you know, Ian Barclay used to be a first grade footy player, worked with the businesses owned by him and Bob Fulton, who was artillery actually as well. But yeah, super flexible. Known him since I was about 16 years old, and he's still a really good mate today. And yeah, he was so good with giving me the time off, and sometimes I'd ring up and say, hey, they've just asked me to stay another 2 weeks, and he'd be like, yeah, have you got a mate? And I was like, yeah, I've got someone. So that was good. But yeah, before going to Yarralin there for 6 months, I came back from Bougainville, and then pretty well straight away went to Butterworth.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
so,
as well. So,
and what was, because I've heard a lot about Butterworth from the guys that had gone over there, and what was it like for you going over to Butterworth?
Yeah, so I loved it. It was an absolute eye-opening experience for me. So there'd been Army Reserve rotations in Malaysia over Christmas since 97. But at that time, because all the regular infantry battalions were so focused on Timor, there was a bit of vacuum for Rifle Company Butterworth. So I think by the time we got there for the Christmas rotation, there'd only been reserve rotations for a whole year. So that was rotation 52. We trained bloody hard. There was a lot of jungle training and a lot of time at the range, but we're also given a lot of freedom when we're in barracks. So we went out Hong Kong bar, Bodie Hossie frequently. Spent most of what we earned and enjoyed ourselves. And although I was there as a cook, every time the guys were in the jungle on ration packs, I'd ask to go out with them because I wanted to do that jungle training as well, wanted to get those experiences. And just on that rotation, like we worked in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand during leave. I went to Burma and Cambodia, and for me that sparked a love of travel, and I've travelled extensively around the world since then. But yeah, that trip really sparked it. But over the years, when operations get quiet, I often hear people say, we shouldn't send reservists to Malaysia. But what I would offer is that I've seen 16 rotations go through Malaysia, and I can tell you the reserve rotations more than hold their own, and they're a feeder into the full-time army. And just from that rotation 52, and just from the private soldiers, I can think of 7 diggers that commissioned, 5 of which 20-something years later are still serving. Most of them are in SOCOM. Other diggers went full-time, into battalions full-time, snipers. One of them got a medal for gallantry in Afghan, another Novocastrian. Shout out, Ryan. And others ended up very high up in other government agencies. So I can guarantee you that both Defence and the taxpayer get a significant return on investment by keeping those reservists there.
100%, mate. And, mate, as you said, when we started the podcast, you joined at a time that we're in 40 years of peace. Then Timor, the bubble goes up.
Yeah.
And then everyone thinks that's it. But then a day that is still remembered to this day, 9/11. Where were you on that day, and what do you remember of?
Yeah, so I was. So there's 3 things. You've got yours about the tsunami and all that, and no cheese TV comments.
No. That one's out.
But for me, mate, I really remember Tiananmen Square protests and the Tiananmen Square massacre in '89. The Berlin Wall coming down, and funnily enough, I did a reenactment of that in Bollywood once when I was in India. Right. Newcastle earthquake the same year, but mate, we were out there, and it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd gone into the kitchen, turned everything on, getting ready to cook breakfast, turned the TV on, and yeah, bam, I see this footage of planes going into the Twin Towers, and then I went and woke a couple of blokes up. I was like, hey, someone's bombed the Twin Towers, and then the Pentagon as well. And then as it kind of standing there, then boom, the next one. And I was like, holy smokes. And, you know, I was a little bit immature about that, and I'd done a bit of a garnish with 2 towers and planes going into them that day. And I just remember the SSM that day just coming in, just whacking it off the Bay Marie and just going, Finchy, they're our closest ally. The world just changed today. So, yeah, that was a bit of a realisation of, nothing is going to be the same anymore. And then, you know, the few weeks after that, there was 1 or 2 people that were there that then disappeared, mostly from the engineering side of the house that, you know, had obviously been called back to go and do something else. But, coming back after 6 months, you know, army bases that didn't even used to have gates on it, all of a sudden were locked all the time. You couldn't wear your uniform down the street anymore. You used to have to wear civvies in, get changed at work. And
Is that still in now, or has it relaxed a bit since?
When I was in recruiting, it wasn't a policy, but it was advised in somewhere. But I'd always wear my uniform to the shopping centre, and when I went and did things, that's where you meet people. And young kids would go, "Oh, you're in the army." No. So, just talk to them about that. I've recruited quite a few people that way.
And I think, too, you look back now, mate, and as you say, like, gates were locked, and it was a bit looser back in the days. It probably tightened things up for
100%,
in a good way too. Because I've had people on the podcast say, "Oh, you could just walk onto an Ogra barracks, mate. Like,
absolutely,
you just walk on and
Singleton."
Yeah. Like and just to think that you're, you know, and now, like, I've been into military bases and the protocol that you have to go through, and, you know, even Richmond, like when I worked there for the RFS, you got to go through so many gates to get in, and it's increased for the better. Like, now, because no Tom, Dick or Harry can just walk on now. You've got to be escorted, and things change, and so that happens, mate. It's a real day. It changed the world, and we've never been right. It's never gone backwards since. That day was just shocked the world, and now we still, you know, who would have foreseen that we would be involved in our longest war of 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq and all these. This is now where you and many others, your careers just go crazy with deployments. And if you joined up in the early 2000s and didn't get a deployment, something was going on.
Yeah, so something was going on with me, but I'll get to that later in the podcast. But I'm still a little bit salty. But anyway, I'll touch on that a few times. But
of course, mate. No, and mate, in 2003, you were promoted to Lance Corporal, and you received the Soldier's Medallion for exemplary service for your support within 8th Brigade. Talk me through this.
Oh, to be honest, I actually don't remember it that well. Right. And, you know, even I don't remember being presented my first stripe for Lance Corporal.
Really? Yeah, right.
No, but I mean, obviously, it's good to know that other people have seen your potential and your abilities, and you take that step to give that person a chance. And that's one of the good things that now as a leader that I get to do. So look at how people are performing. They might have been in 10 years and they might have been in 1 year, but you can identify people's potential.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, like, I had this conversation with a mate of mine who, you know, he would always say, "Oh, mate, I never wear my medals." And I said, "Why? Like, be proud of your service. Be proud of, like, you know, when you have kids, you pass these on to say, Dad gave of service, or Mum gave of service." And these little, you know, like these soldiers' medallions and all, that could be something that, you know, recognition goes a long way. It really does.
Yeah, and I agree. And that's something that I've been very cognizant of as a leader, and making sure that I recognise people's achievements where they should be. So yeah, I've often write people up for different things. So yeah,
that's good. And it's good to see that there are, you know, that it's continued, that, you know, recognition is That's all people want, is just that little bit, and it can go a long way. And mate, in that same year, you took a position in the newly formed RRF. And for our civilians, mate, what's RRF?
Yeah, so it was the Reserve Response Force, and under the Howard government, after like a series of international incidences like the Bali bombings, the government had asked 2nd Division to be able to support civil authorities during either large events, things like Commonwealth Games and Olympics and all that kind of stuff, but also with civil emergencies. It was just like a lot of low-risk search stuff, so especially at the Olympics, but it also combined with DAC, which is Defence Aid to the Civil Communities. So now that's just part of 2Div's standard role, so floods, fires, all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, right. And this is where you first come into contact with 4RAR.
Yeah.
And what was that? Because at that stage they were building, so they were building into the SF.
Yep.
And for people who aren't aware, 4RAR Commando is now renamed the 2nd Commando Regiment.
Yep.
So, and what was that like working alongside 4RAR?
Yeah, so for me, I'd been sent down there because the caterer I had in Bougainville, Graham Alexander, was a previous caterer at 4RAR. So his mate was down there and they had a few staffing issues. So they sent me down there to work there. And yeah, so it was just basically kitchen time for me. Yeah, rather than being outfield, I spent plenty of time out the field, but that was getting used to being in a commercial kitchen. Yeah, I mean, at that stage, I was pretty fit at that stage, so I was running the 2.4 kilometre BFA consistently at like 8:14, 8:15.
Yeah, right.
So, but I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do in defence. And at that stage, all I wanted to do was deploy. And so at that time, just before Timor, they'd slowly started to get rid of cooks. So, and then Timor came up and they're like, we've got no one. So cooks were getting deployed everywhere then at that stage. And, you know, I'd applied full-time as well for LCM8 crewmen because I could see that they were getting deployed everywhere as well. But like 2 months prior to that, they were screaming for them. And then when I applied, they were full. So, yeah, I remember, you know, Craig Hamburger was one of the few people down there that was happy to speak to the cooks. But also Nova Castrian.
Yes, and episode 100. Go back and have a listen to his podcast. So
so Bergs, I remember saying to Bergs one day when I was just kind of deciding what I was going to do, and I was like, "Oh, where do you reckon this is going to go?" And he's like, "Mate, I reckon this capability's just going to kick off." I was like, "Do you reckon I've got a better chance of deploying if I had a crack or at commandos, or do you reckon as a cook?" He's like, "Mate, I just see this going, like this becoming a thing and it being a whole commando regiment." And I was like, "Yeah, mate, I don't see that." So, yeah, I just wasn't sure. I just thought I'd had a better chance at that time as deployed as a cook, but yeah.
Well, mate, I asked Langers that question, and I've asked many guys who I've had on from 4RAR and then now 2nd Commando, and they say it themselves, mate, that they were just in it at the time. They didn't see that what they were doing would be building capabilities that is now world renowned.
Yeah.
Like the 2nd Commando Regiment now, world renowned for those capabilities. And mate, you were there at the early, and I don't think, as you say, mate, Afghanistan, the capabilities that were tested and they had to evolve and adapt, if Afghanistan didn't happen, it probably would have taken many, many years or decades to build those capabilities that only can come through combat.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, we spoke about this offline, is you can't buy the training that those deployments gave Australian soldiers. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, you know, the commandos paid the heaviest toll in Afghanistan, 12 killed in combat, and one in lead up to deploy, so pre-deployment.
Yeah,
it's like more than 75% of the hits came from the 2nd Commando Regiment.
Yeah.
So, very big toll on those guys. And so, mate, so you're at a bit of crossroads here, aren't you, of what you're going to do?
Yeah, I didn't know what was happening in life.
Yeah, right. So what's happening then? Like, what do you stay down that cook path, or what
I just hadn't decided what I was going to do. So until I saw, and I just thought the best choice of deployment was to stay in my current job. And I remember talking to who's an infantry mate, and I said, maybe I'll go across the infantry. He's like, don't go to infantry, mate. He's like, we want you to cook for us, because when we know that you're cooking, we get hamburgers, we get we get all that good stuff when we're outfield. But he said, you go away and we start to get stew. So yeah, I guess I felt that at that stage that I was also contributing a lot to the morale of those people. And even if I was having a crappy day, if I was in the kitchen, when people came through that meal point to get a feed, I'd always be happy, because that might be the only friendly interface that soldier may get that day, right? So, and I'd always say, g'day, try this, or tell me what you think of that. And just try to lighten the mood a bit, and because that infantry training is hard, and especially doing pack marches at Singleton in the middle of summer and all that kind of stuff, and
in winter it's freezing.
Yeah, mate, 40 degrees, and someone sends you out a stew for lunch, and that's the last thing you want. So and in winter, it's freezing. So it's a different, it's absolutely like you can be the make or break for people, and just turn a shitty situation into. And I know it myself, being out on the fire ground. Yeah. When you come in and have a feed, and it's a hot meal, and you're like, oh, geez, this is, thank you, like, because we're used to the cold frozen sandwiches that you bite into, and they suck, and you're like, that's why I take for a long time I've just taken my own food, because I'm like, you know what, I'm not having frozen sandwiches anymore. But when you get a hot meal, there's nothing better than when you're going through the hurt locker, it's shit, it's there's your outfield, or you're coming back in from exercise, or my case fires. There's nothing better. And, you can be that morale boost, and just, here, mate, do you want a brew? Like, there's nothing better than, here's a brew, mate. So, and this is 2005. Are you at this point, are you thinking of getting out, or are you thinking? No, I was loving it. Yeah, I was absolutely loving it, and I think that's why all my cousins joined. They just saw how much I was enjoying life, and I mean, at that stage, I was going away doing plenty of work for the reserves. On top of that, I was probably doing one round the world trip per year. I'd do 4 weeks a year to a country I'd never been to before, and another 6-week trip to, South America or Southeast Asia, or a lot. So, and then it's just army holidays, but hard work, really hard work, and it's a pretty good way to save money when you're away and you can't spend it. So,
well, mate, and you are awarded an Australia Day medallion for exemplary service again, and I want to highlight this, mate, as when you were deployed over at Butterworth, and what was, or am I mixing that up there? Is that
no, I got that just before we went, I think, or it was in 2005. Again, I think it was just to recognise that level of commitment, and I don't know, I guess people were just happy with my work. So I went over to Butterworth again with 41 RNSWR, Royal New South Wales Regiment, on RCB 72.
Another good trip.
Yeah, it was a really good trip. And just to clarify, although they're deployments, they're non-operational. So it's like those trips over there are focused on training and international engagement.
Is there some talk that they're trying to get them recognised now? Is that a thing?
So people talk about it. I think prior to 1986 is just a stab. They did end up issuing the Australian Service Medal with Southeast Asia clasp for people that were over there. They were doing patrols, right? There was a risk there. I would say that risk was very low. Should they be recognised for at the moment? I don't believe so. That's my opinion, but I'm also not in honours and awards. But having read some documentation, I think they're of the same opinion as me.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I did see something flash up as, looking in the news or something. That
there's a couple of people that just can't let that go. They want that ASM to be a double ASM, and there's other people want to extend that timeline, but no.
And you come back from your second trip to Butterworth, and then you are employed as a 2IC on Operation, is it
Acolyte?
What's this?
So everyone that was on that rotation with me in Malaysia was offered the opportunity to extend their contract and go down to Melbourne and support the Commonwealth Games. So again, it was a lot of that RRF stuff, so low risk search. So I remember my platoon took the back off every single toilet in the MCG. That was a long day, a long night. Yeah, and searched in there, really low risk search. But we'd always try and get jobs in the athletes' village whenever we could. My platoon sergeant, Seth Pulavira, was related to a couple of the athletes that were representing Tonga. So we did get to chat to quite a few of the athletes, which was interesting. But overall, just like at the Commonwealth Games, it was just a great vibe around the place and just really good to be there.
And working at a home Commonwealth Games is special, because I've spoken to a lot of guys who were, part of the Sydney
Olympics,
Dan Fortune,
Op Gold,
and some of the 4RR boys as well, and they often speak that was it was pretty cool to be working on your home Olympics, and for you Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Pretty cool.
It was just the feeling. Everyone was happy, right? Everyone wanted to be there. It was a really good time.
And mate, in 2006, you're on the move and you post to 3RAR and deployed to Timor. And so you wanted Timor back in 1999, and you get it in 2006.
Yeah.
What was your role over here?
So, just getting to 3RAR in the first place, we'd just finished off Op Acolyte, and then the caterer at 3RAR, Henry Winkler, rang me up and he's like, "Hey, Finchy, do you want to come and work at 3RAR for the year?" And the first thing I said, because I'd been given a few, in the kind of 7 years prior, people go, "Oh, come work for us, we're going to deploy," and all this kind of stuff. And I said, "Hey, what's the chance of either getting a deployment or getting on paracourse?" And straight up he's like, "Fuck all to both." And I was like, "Okay, thanks for being honest. I'll come work for you for a year." So my first full day of work there was 24th of April, so that's Kapyong Day. So so that was a pretty busy day there in Holsworthy, and I'd been to Kapyong before, so I'd had an understanding of the battle and how the battle played out, and been on the ground, and so it was good for me to be at 3RR for a Kapyong Day. And then in May we had an exercise in Townsville. And then, so while we're in barracks at 3RR, so everyone just works in the kitchen, bit of a rotational thing. You might work in different areas of the kitchen at different times and rotate every month, but all the cooks were then divided between the companies when you went into any kind of field environment. So I was part of Bravo Company, so that when we did any field, when Bravo Company went field and there was a cook required, so I would go with Bravo Company with two other guys. So while we were in Townsville waiting for that exercise to start, there was a lot of rumours going around that we might be going to Timor. Eventually the brigade commander addressed us all and he said, "Look, there's a 40% chance this is going to happen." And it was on again, off again. It was going to happen, it wasn't going to happen, and then it was like, "No, it's definitely off." And we're like, "Okay, it's disappointing, no worries." And again, the caterer just said to me, said to everyone, goes, "Does anyone want to go on the Manura? because we've got some embarked forces on there and they want some extra cooks on there to help cook for the army lads. And I was like, straight up, I was like, yeah, I'll take my section on. And so my section got onto the Manura, and at that time we'd had a couple of lads from 1 and 2 RAR as well. So we got onto Timor, and then literally 12 hours later, the captain of the ship just piped over the system. We're heading north to an undisclosed location. Just like to remind everyone of OPSEC, no conversations about this outside the ship, blah, blah, blah. And, mate, I was stoked. I was so bloody excited. So
putting your hand up, volunteering, got you.
Yeah. Mate, I was so happy. And, you know, we'd gotten to Timor, and then I rang my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and because we couldn't say anything until a certain time, I said, hey, guess where I am? She said, Townsville on X. I was like, I'm in Dili. And she goes, guess where I am? I was like, you're at work. She goes, I'm in Darwin, I'll see you tomorrow. And
oh, wow.
So we had both been asked, would we like to deploy? Neither of us discussed it, and we both accepted it. And then when we were allowed to talk about it, we ended up both ended up being in Timor, both as part of Battle Group Faithful.
But yeah, right. And did you see each other on the ground? Or?
Yeah, quite a few times. Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, we were in the same company, but so there were times when we were in the same general location, but other times not. But when we got to Dili and we were still on the ship, like, they were pretty reluctant to let us get off because no one had requested us to get off or anything like that. And I was like, mate, this is my chance. I'm getting off here. And Michael Fussell was on there, and I went up to him. I was like, hey, sir. I was like, this is all I've ever wanted to do since being in defence. I said, I grew up in Fussell Street. You get me off this ship, I'll get you that sign. And so Fuzz got me my section off. He'd arranged it. So that, I think it might have been the next day in the morning, we went ashore on LCM8. Got off, and I think I remember we hitched a ride because I actually didn't even know where we were going. We hitched a ride to the airport on an APC, and they dropped us off there. But fast forward, I did part of my para course with Fuzz later, but I didn't really see him after that because then he went and did selection, and I didn't give him that sign. And then when he died, I went and got the sign, and I sent it to his parents, and I wrote a letter with it saying, this is what I promised, and explained it. And they gave me a call and just said, hey, look, this is the first laugh we've had since he's died. Thank you so much. And they said, do you mind if we hang it in the pool room? And I was like, go for it. So
And, mate, it's ironic that you and I are recording a couple of days after his anniversary, and I know Dave knew him very well as well, and so many
A-field battery.
So many other guys, you know, speak highly of who he was, and you know, he's a short, red-headed guy that, you know, he was fiery, and because I know the podcast that I did last weekend, Kurt spoke of him as well, and you know, played rugby, loved his rugby, and just, you know, that's something, mate, that it's really nice that you did do that, like you followed through, and because, mate, he gave you that opportunity 100%. To get into, you know, this is what you always wanted to do.
And it was that thing too, that it was just on the back of the mind. For me, if I say I'm going to do something, like, I just can't not do it. So
you're a man of your word, which is very commendable, because I am as well. If I say I'm going to do something and I can help, I will. And, mate, did that come as a shock a couple of years later when you heard that he had been killed in Afghanistan?
Yeah, of course. Like, but I wasn't close at all. Like, he was an officer, I was a corporal. You know, he'd done me that solid, helped me out, but like, we weren't mates or anything like that.
Of course. So,
but it's like, of course, it's like, it's someone that you knew, someone that you'd worked with. But yeah.
And so, how long were you deployed for in Timor?
So, after we got off, I'll just kind of lead up into this. And so we were at the airport for a little while, and the CSM had gotten there, Warren Officer Moore, really good operator, short little fella, yeah, top guy. But he just said to me, like, Finchy, you're in charge of airport security, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, no worries. And then there's this time we're on the gate, and just gunfight just broke out just on the roundabout, and so it might have been like a few hundred metres just before getting to the airport, and just straight away I was just like, bam, righto, you two don't let anyone in or out of this airport, blah, 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 righto, Roscoe, get the gun up there, rhino, blah, blah. And I remember Roscoe going, oh, Finchy, shut the fuck up, get the gun up there now, move. And then we kind of, like, we pushed through this field, and, yeah, I was like, yeah, get the gun up on the high ground. Took about 2 or 3 minutes to get there. By that stage, mate, they'd moved on. But that just shows that repetition of training, and, you know, even just things like being in the Mill Skills team, and I'd been a Mill Skills commander a few times, it just kicks in, and that training, when taught correctly, yeah, you make decisions straight away instinctively, and it was good. But yeah, there was like plenty of like riots around. I can't remember who it was, but it wasn't too many episodes back. One of the SAS guys you had on, it was there. He said like that first few weeks in Timor was wild. But yeah, there was riots, and we went to riots with OC Stream, and
yeah, right.
And yeah, it was. Yeah.
So it was pretty hostile.
Yeah, like we didn't get guns pointed at us so much. Well, I remember Dave Smith they'd make these darts out of big nails and just slingshot them, like, because he was driving around trying to get stuff, and a few of those through his vehicle. And yeah, it was him and I can remember the Ramey boys as well. They'd got all these troop carriers. Oh, sorry, not troop carriers. Yeah, the troopies, the Land
Rovers, yeah,
Land Cruiser troopies, whatever they were. Yeah, and they were like lying around from the first time we were there.
Yeah, right.
So no wheels, and and these Ramey guys just got them all back. And I remember Kyle Mabbott and a few other blokes just working on those things 24 hours a day, just until we had means of transport to get around. And they had no back doors. We just hanging out the back with styres. It was crazy. But yeah, that's how we were getting around. But one of the funny stories, well, funny from my end, I think it was Alfredo Renato that was out at the time, or someone was out, and basically across the road from the heliport, because we'd moved into the heliport, it was probably a few weeks after. We were in the airport for the first bit, and then moved to the heliport, and I was on the gate picket, and part of the picket orders was, if you see anyone go into that house, let us know, because the guy who owns that house, we're after him. And I remember calling up CSM. I was like, hey, someone's gone into that house. And I was like, oh, what do he look like? I was like, oh, Timorese bloke. Mate, they got this. They got a section, or might have been 12 people, whatever. That all kind of went like banking up at the door, boom, into the building, and it was his neighbour, this old bloke who was just using his shower. Mate, I got told. So that was all in Dili, and then after about a month being in Dili, we were on ration packs the whole time, and like sleeping under hoochies. I was under a hoochie the whole time we were in Timor, and I went up to Gleno with an old cook, Phil, as part of Bravo Company, and they'd been on ration packs for a couple of months by the time we got to up there, because I was up there, and I still remember the first meal I served was beef Wellington, and mate, the OC couldn't believe it. He's like, "This is my favourite meal." And so yeah, after two months on ration packs, but yeah, it was good, really good bunch of lads up there, professional. As a corporal, I'd not seen such detailed orders before, and really how well it was planned. And I got to observe. I didn't get to sit in on those orders, but I got to observe the OC giving really detailed orders. And yeah, it was a good experience to see how much planning and everything goes into it. But yeah, I was up there, and after about 6 weeks, we went back down, and then I was down in Dili for a while. I think we were there about 4 months at the time, and the CSM came up to me and said, "Hey, do you want to go back a little bit early and do paracourse?" And I was like, I could not believe it. It was,
the two things you were told you're not going to deploy.
Two things I got told I had no chance of doing. Yeah, both came to fruition. So, mate, that experience of being a section commander as a corporal, regardless of what trade I was, just being a section commander on the ground and all that training and all the stuff that you're shown, that was the highlight of my whole career so far. So I really enjoyed that time.
Well, I know, mate, Dave spoke about it in his podcast where he said, you never know, just take whatever posting you can get, because you never know where it could lead or what you could do, what experiences you get. Mate, you were told, yep, you're not going to deploy, you're not going to go on your paracourse, and you do both. Yeah. And most 3RAR or SF veterans I've spoken to speak of, jumping out of a plane is not a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
How did you find your paracourse, and was it a tough course, and was there a lot of injuries?
Yeah, including myself. So
let's talk about that.
Yeah. So paracourse is probably the best structured course that I'd done in defence, because it started on a Wednesday, which is super weird for any kind of course, but then after a day hanging from the ceiling in the risers and climbing up the risers and then throwing the risers down and just landing back down, it was only kind of 3 days, and then you had the weekend off. You needed the weekend to physically recover. I was so bloody sore, and then come the Monday again, back into it in the risers, but then it moved to the tower and then moved to actual jumping. So there's a bit of 5 cent, 50 cent before you jump, and for the few seconds after, while you wait and see if that parachute's actually going to open. Excuse me. But for the first jump I had, it was first in the line, so I was the last person in the chalk to jump. I hit so hard, like really hard, my head hit the ground, and then second jump, I was the first person out, and as I jumped, the static line ripped the helmet off my head, and I was just like, my only other experience had been hitting the ground so hard, and I'm like, I'm gone. I just remember going 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, oh, there it goes. And one of the instructors just got underneath me, and he said, "Finchy, when I tell you to flare, flare." So flare is a technique where you pull down part of the parachute and it slows the descent rate. That is the only time I've landed and I could have just stood there. So it was super soft. There's just that experience of that instructor. But so I only did 2 jumps then, and then the planes got called away for a different task, and then went back a month or so later to jump again. And so I think on about the 5th jump on that time, I hit the ground really hard. And I didn't break anything, but I just did so much soft tissue damage in my feet. It took over 10 years to recover.
Wow.
The first year I was kind of walking on the tippy toes because just any pressure on my heels really hurt. But because I knew my time in 3RAR was coming to an end, and I knew that I'd never get that opportunity to jump again, I convinced the doctor that I was good to go and to let me go back down and finish and do the jump. So went back down. Mate, I've been praying about that one, and it rained for about a week before, for the whole week before that, and the DZ was so soft. I'd had 2 pairs of the thickest socks on. I'd put gel inner soles in my shoes, and then just finished off the course and didn't have any issues completing it. But I remember Fuzz was on, did that. The jumps on that part. I don't think he was on the same initial part of the course, but we jumped together then. And Sergeant Rokov was my instructor on that course, and he was the commando who got the Star of Courage for in a civilian jump when the gust of wind kind of folded the chute, and he turned around and saved the kid, the young fella.
Yeah, he paid the ultimate out at Picton.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Mate.
Yep, I remember that, and that was an absolute tragedy. And and it goes to show that how dangerous parachuting is. And mate, it was you injured yourself really bad.
Yeah.
Was it, and being young, I'm right, and are you paying for it now? Like, are you still... Is it still...
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If I, depending on certain shoes I wear, like my feet will throb. It was literally 10 years of having to get a foot massage, whether by myself or asking my wife, could you massage my feet before I get out of bed? Just to get that blood flowing in my feet.
Wow.
Because my feet would just throb all the time. Yes, it's gotten a lot more manageable now, but if I wear certain types of shoes or do certain activities, then it comes back.
So is it mixed feelings then when you got presented your wings? Because I know a lot of people, they're proud to receive them. And
mate, I was stoked.
Yeah,
mate, I'd always wanted to get paraquat, and being a choco cook, the chances of that were probably very, very slim, and I'm probably the only reservist cook, being a reservist at the time, that actually ever got 3-hour parawings. So,
and did you get to wear the beret?
Yeah, so I had the dull cherry beret. Yeah, so and the unit I'm at now wears the dull cherry beret, but I prefer the slouch hat. So even though I can wear it, I usually wear a slouch hat.
No, mate, and goes to show that, as you say, mate, again, you were told, no, you're not going to deploy, you're not going to do the para course, and you did both, and you passed, and you overcame adversity, because a lot of people would go, no, I'm done, but you wanted those wings, mate.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if that was just stubbornness, or foolishness, or a bit of pride, or I don't know. Maybe a mix of all of the above.
And mate, in 2009, so we go forward a little bit after your para course, you spent some time in HRR and posted to the Incident Response Regiment, completing the SF Support Staff Selection. What was that like, mate? Yeah,
so the High Readiness Reserve was another government demand of an increased skills within the 2nd Division. And the whole point of that was to increase the operational readiness of the reserve forces. And at that time, it included having a shadow posting to a full-time unit, so that either against a certain position, so that either that person could deploy and you could backfill them, which was the most common, or that you could deploy and that unit could still operate. Mine was that Incident Response Regiment, and I went on the pretext that they had a corporal and a sergeant's position on the next rotation to Afghanistan, and that they only had a private and a sergeant. So it was mostly working out of the SOCOM mess there, but just before the deployment, they promoted the private to corporal, and I got stuck back at IRR doing the role of the caterer for the next year. But I mean, that is what it is, and like it wouldn't have worried me if they told me that that's why you're going there. But to dangle the carrot when they knew that it wasn't the case, and it wasn't the higher up in the unit, it was the person who wanted to deploy. Yeah,
politics, mate.
Yeah, well, but aside from that, the Incident Response Regiment was a really good unit, super professional, and I knew a couple of the lads there from 8 Combat Engineer Regiment who'd gone full time, and they looked after me well there. But the SF Support Staff Selection was nothing big. It was just more of a barrier test for the support staff, just to try and establish that minimum level of fitness and competence across all the supporting staff. And it was just another step forward in that unit's evolution of making them more professional. And I mean, the prep for that, I'd done plenty of lead-up training, and mostly with the Ramey guys. Ramey boys there, or Ramey dudes are always good. But they're pretty fit, and I don't actually recall it being super, super physically demanding, but I mean, it was things like running that 3.2 Ks in full mop gear. And again, at the time, I was a pretty good runner. Yeah, so
with that, because you'd had the parish, was that still hard? Like when you had your injury of,
Yeah, I mean, throughout that whole period, like I think that was called plantar fasciitis or whatever it is.
I've had plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, right. So that whole period, my feet were just killing it. Even when I had my engagement party, I couldn't even stand properly.
Right. Mate, the things you do, and you look back later on in life going, oh, why did I do that? Because aches and pains.
But I mean, I don't regret doing it at all. Yes, it's unfortunate that I'd had that accident, but I'm still stoked, and it's a kind of a little bit of a it opens doors. Like I'm often at a function and someone with 3-hour parrawings will come up to you and, hey mate, how you going? And just get chatting.
Mate, there's always a good conversation starter. So and mate, in that same year you deployed as Op Vic Fires, the Black Saturday. That, mate, they were devastating. What were you doing down here?
So, because I've got a rural property in Newcastle that's surrounded by bushland, I joined the RFS a couple of years earlier. So, apart from having a strong interest in what was happening, both from adding to my understanding of fire, but obviously something like that happens to a community in Australia, is super keen to help out any way you can. And again, that was still at IRR, and we took down a convoy of plant and equipment and sustainment items. I'm not sure why, but we only ended up being there for a few days, possibly because TUDIV got tasked to do the assist. But there's a few things that really stood out for me there is up in King Lake.
Total devastation.
Mate, it was crazy. You could see for kilometres through what a week ago was forest. But there wasn't a single branch. It was like putting pencils straight up and then just bending them slightly. You could see the heat that the whole tree had moved.
For the fierce and ferocious fires.
It was so fierce, and I just remember looking at these long white lines on the ground, just in ash, and I was like, "That's weird." And then there was these ceramic cups, and it took me a little while to realise they were the power lines. That it was so hot that even the power lines just turned to ash. And then there was a few surprising things. Like there would just be a random house amongst all the houses that had burned out that just didn't burn. And then when you look at it, you're like, how did that one not burn? And then the brick house next door did. Yeah, there was one guy who drove through where I was, and he had a Mercedes, and the whole side of his car had melted and was like scratching across the bottom of on the ground. So, but the one thing that kind of, apart from the walking down those streets and then walking past houses and you're like, there's something dead there. I hope it's not human. But I just remember as well, there was some families trying to get out. One of the families had stopped, the other car hit the back of them, and there was just this 100 mil rays of molten material on the road, and that was 7 people, And, whilst the 1920 bushfires were far bigger in size, just the intensity of those bushfires, that was next level.
And, mate, I know what you're talking about because I've experienced fires myself that are fierce and ferocious, and it's for the civilian listener, what Finchy is talking about is that you're seeing actual trees that are they're twigs and they're just pushed over from the ferocity of a fire it is, and it's hot because to do that to a tree, you're like, and as you say, mate, with some houses we sit there and defend and go, how did that house survive, and the one next to it that probably should have survived and this house shouldn't? How is that pile of rubble, and this is, and Yeah, that would have been because, as you say, mate, Kinglake was decimated. There was just no, and I've had a couple of mates who were in CFA on the podcast, and they talk about it as well, and they just said it was just like it was like an atomic bomb had gone off, and that stays with you, mate. And so you're only down there for a couple of days.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was less than a week, but yeah, basically went down and dropped off all this equipment, and then I think we were hoping to stay. Like, we took all the gear to stay, but just that's not how it panned out.
And then, so you come back from that, mate, and in that same year in 2009, you then post into 1 Commando Regiment.
Yeah. So
what was that like, mate, working with those guys?
So how I got there was I was at IRR, and SOCOM would have all these meetings, and you'd have the different units coming in, and there was one time I saw I was like, oh, that's Kerry Danes. And if anyone had been to Tully back in the day, I don't know if it's still there, but the OR's mess in Tully, the other ranks mess in Tully, the roof of that mess is painted like jungle canopy, and they've cut the bottom of an Iroquois helicopter out and stuck it on the roof, so it looks like a chopper is coming to land into the mess.
Oh, wow.
And then all down the side is booby traps and things that can kill you in the jungle. And there's just a little note there, that little plaque there that said this was done by Sergeant Kerry Danes. I thought to myself, I want to meet this guy. I hope I come across him in my career so I can say, great job. And then I remember hearing on the radio that he got arrested in Laos. He was detained in Laos with his family. His kids were released after a little while, and then Kay, his wife, was still in there. I can't remember how long they did, but he was in jail there for a long time. Detained there for a long time. Yeah, until the diplomatic side of things sorted itself out. But yeah, and when I saw him, I just chatted to him. I said, I've always wanted to work for you. And he said, well, why don't you come on over? So, I finished up there and started working at 1 Commando, so it was good. Still living in Newcastle, travelling to work. So I was at HMAS Penguin there. They'd just moved there. And, so it was about a 3-hour round trip, but after a few months, they were like, hey, you're most used to us at Holsworthy. So that 3-hour trip turned back into a 5-hour trip, and I was back at Holsworthy anyway. But in that time, I ended up going to Europe for a year with my wife. A lot of battlefield history tours, but just travelling around Europe, awesome time. I came back overland through Russia, Mongolia and China on the train, and then from Laos, I'd arranged with my next door neighbour, Chris. I'd always wanted to kayak the Mekong River, so we kayaked 2,600 k's from Luang Prabang in Laos to the South China Sea in Vietnam down the Mekong River. And
wow.
Yeah, that was an absolute adventure in itself. There was a lot of things that happened on that trip. I got arrested a few times, got towed and kayak flipped and snapped in. But yeah, it was an awesome trip, but I probably wouldn't do it again. Yeah. But yeah, it was an amazing trip. I came back, I think I lost about 30 kilos in 6 weeks. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just, and the other thing was I thought that I was just going to be a absolute gazelle again because I'd lost so much weight, and as soon as I ran, I had about 100 metres and I was out of breath, and then I realised I'd been sitting down for 6
You lost all your cardio.
Yeah, sitting down for 6 weeks. So whilst my abs might have looked a bit better, I couldn't run as well as I thought I could.
And you promoted to sergeant while you were at 1 Commando, and
no, so you just posted back to 8 Sisby in Newcastle.
Oh right,
and then promoted to sergeant when I was there.
And mate, I want to go forward to in late 2012, mate. You made the decision to become an officer, and what made you decide to go down this path and transition away from being an NCO? Yeah,
so by 2012, Australia had been in combat operations for 23 years, and try as I might to get there, I hadn't managed to get onto a single one. And I know that every person on your podcast says, mate, if you were in during that period and you didn't get a trip, you weren't trying. But I can tell you now,
you were trying. You were trying.
I was trying. And so for me, I just had a good hard look at what jobs were available in defence and, you know, what jobs were actually being deployed operationally. And there was a lot. But movements officer seemed to be something that I thought I would give a crack at. And, at that time, like, I was still loving Army and still loving it, but I thought if I don't do this now, I might not still be loving defence in another 5 years, or I might be too old to do it. So I'll do it now while I've still got the love and see how it goes. So, I sat the officer selection board, successful at that. Yeah, did the training, and it's not an easy transition.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, especially once you get to sergeant, and, you know, most of your mates are sergeants or senior corporals or warrant officers, and then all of a sudden you go to being the person telling them what to do. But, I mean, there's pros and cons with it. You've got that experience, and one thing that I don't think I was as good an officer as someone who'd just done RMC, but there's different types of value that come with having been a NCO first. Like, I would say that I cared a lot more for my troops and than other people before me. I wouldn't stand. I never wanted to stuff them around, because I know what it's like to get stuffed around, and I'd make an effort to you know, follow it, make sure things got followed through, make sure that paperwork was done correctly. I'd had, you know, there was another unit at the time that had a whole heap of infantry lads that had put in their applications to go full-time, and the person they gave them to didn't know how to process them. So they just put them in their drawer, and 3 years later, when that person left, all these applications were in their drawer, right? And so you've just lost all those guys. You've lost their confidence. You've lost the confidence of everyone in that company. So, just making sure you're not that guy, and you're really looking after everyone. So, it's got pros and cons, but, it is a hard transition.
Because I know Dan Fortune spoke of it too, because he went from private to brigadier, and, you know, he was a trooper in the SAS and then went down the officer's path, and he said he could understand, and being that he was a trooper, you know, or he was a private himself, and then, you know, transitioned into being an officer. But, you know, it would be hard. It would be, but as you know, there's different types of leadership. There's all different ways of being a leader. And were you, being that you were, you know, you were an NCO and then you went down you commissioned to be an officer, were you still trying, like, your leadership is lead from the front? Is that?
Oh, absolutely, right. But the other thing that I had to learn was that's not always your job now. So there was a lot of things that I wanted to do, and corporals or sergeants would say, hey, sir, that's actually our job. And so you're like, okay, yep, got it. Sign here, please.
So, and so you finish your training, mate, and do you have the officers' ceremony at RMC?
Yeah, so for me, for most of those people, it would have been probably a really proud moment in their career, but I was a bit disappointed in my performance at RMC. I actually graduated a bit, not down, but it wasn't super proud like when I'd finished Kapuka, and part of that reason was that I'd applied for a lot of recognition of prior learning for the course, and because I'd done a lot of that stuff over a period of 14 years, I'd actually been granted that. But what that meant was that instead of doing all these blocks of training together and having a really strong cohort and building those relationships as you come through and getting picked up for small bad habits that you've picked up along the way, or that's how it was done 10 years ago, that's not how it's done now. Because I'd gotten that recognition of prior learning, I basically went straight into that testing phase at RMC, so I got smashed on a lot of things. And it was only that I had some really good colleagues there that, helped, as we all helped each other. But yeah, without those good colleagues, probably wouldn't have passed that time around anyway.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
And so mixed feelings. And then where do you post into after your commission?
Yeah, so again, what I didn't realise was a movements officer is just a job within transport. So if you go to the Corps of Transport as an officer, you can get allocated one of 7 different areas within transport. And so I got allocated to road movements. That was okay because it was in Newcastle, and I ended up going back as a platoon commander of 16 Transport Squadron, which is part of 8 CISB in Newcastle, and had about 60 staff in my platoon. Very good corporals, a lot of good corporate knowledge, excellent soldiers who were there because they wanted to be. About a third of my soldiers had degrees. I didn't have a degree. Another third were tradies. And those problem-solving skills and the outcomes that you can achieve when you've got such a dedicated and trained force across a whole spectrum of different jobs, what you can achieve is amazing. And one thing that I really did there was I didn't do any planning in isolation, and that is one of the things I say, never plan in isolation, right? But I would take I'd turn up to briefs and I'd have a few people with me, and everyone else is there by himself, because I could ask someone else next to me, is that plan of his going to work, before it gets to my speaking part, or, and I think they really enjoyed it. And I'd give, if it wasn't my plan, but we went with that plan, I'd give that person the credit, Yeah. Or most of the time it was a blend of plans, like this was my idea, this is your idea is better, but we need to achieve this. So that's how we're going to do that. So,
but I think that's a good way to look at, because I know myself being, a crew leader and a deputy captain in the RFS, I often go, guys, this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? And they might go, oh, Adam, have you thought of this? Or have you thought of that? Or did you see that? And it's like, oh, no, I didn't. And then we implement it and change the plan. That to me that was how I was taught, that you always listen to your guys that you're in command of, because they might come up with a better solution, or, and sometimes I know I had to learn the hard way, and you have as well over the years, that sometimes you go, guys, this is a plan. We know, it's shit, we know, but this is what it is, and that's hard to implement, to get you guys to go, look, this is the only plan, this is what we have to do. Yeah.
But one thing I did learn, I did see at a higher level that often happened. Like, I remember being in orders in Battle Group Waratah there, and the commander would just stop, gets to a part, why isn't he here? Okay, stop the whole planning process. They bring in a private soldier and say, okay, is this plan going to work for you? You're the sniper. And he'd say, well, you just give me the task and an area that I'm allowed to be, and this is what I'll achieve. But he'd often say, look, instead of being there, I need to be there. And there was a lot of those specialist inputs from engineers, or even just from a personnel management side. Sir, that might not work. How about we do this? And again, good leadership, and I learn a lot from that.
So in 2016, mate, you deploy again on Op Resolute. What was Op Resolute, and what was your role over there?
Yeah, so again, I was still at 8 CISB at the time. Great CO, current CO 5 Brigade, Jodie Lording. Yeah, and she was really proactive on getting her staff on deployments and things that develop them professionally. So Op Resolute is the whole of government effort to protect Australia's sovereign borders, especially up north. And it does everything from stopping people smuggling and illegal arrivals to stopping illegal fishing. So my deployment was Darwin-based and was only for a few months. I was a watchkeeper, and a watchkeeper is basically the centre point of contact that all the information comes to. So all these people send that information through to this single phone line or email address, and then you decide who needs to know that information and how that will be actioned. So I learnt so much about Australia's borders and territories, maritime law, where we own the seafloor but not the fishing rights, and super interesting, and provided a lot of experience in working with both the tri-service environment but also with a lot of other government agencies such as Border Force.
Because I was going to ask that you, in that role, you're working with the Navy.
Yeah,
working,
all of them.
So
the commander of that operation, it was Navy.
Yeah,
and
right.
Yeah, so there's a pretty big naval involvement there. But yeah, obviously Air Force as well. There's those patrols are not just sea and air, they're land as well. So you've got your 51 Far North Queensland Regiment and North Force doing actual foot and boat patrols through certain areas. So, and obviously your Border Force and other agencies as well, all tied in. It was very interesting operation and good professional development as well.
Absolutely. Well, working with inner agencies, mate, it's always good of, doing those roles. And I know of North Force, and I know a few of the guys that have been deployed with North Force, and one of my good mates over in WA actually did a lot over there. He's a reservist over there, and he did a deployment up there and on Op Resolute, and it's still current to this day, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still going on.
Yeah, it's still ongoing. And so, mate, another rewarding deployment for you, and then in 2018 you are still a movements officer and deploy on Operation, is it Augury? What's this?
At the time, I'm still at Joint Movements Coordination Office in Melbourne, JMCO Melbourne, and at the time I was living in Sale, so it's about a 7-hour round trip to and from work. So I always said I loved the job so much I'd do it for free, and when you have to travel 7 hours for work, you really are doing it for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was fortunate enough to be given a 2-month deployment to the Philippines over the Christmas period in 2008. So after the siege of Marawi in 2017 by Islamic insurgents, the Australian government entered into a enhanced defence cooperation program with the Philippines, and that saw the ADF, mostly Army, but whole of ADF train over 10,000 Armed Forces of the Philippines troops. So, I was there in a movements officer role, but I think the Filipinos really like the style of instruction from the Australians compared to when they work with other nations. And we saw that more of we're working with colleagues on an equal footing, and we were learning so much about how they do business as well. I mean, they've just been in combat operations. I can remember going to Christmas parties over there of units and the CEO getting up and saying, it's been a good year, we've only lost 6 people in combat this year at the unit Christmas party. So just, being in that war-fighting mindset, and it's good to understand that, we might be in that situation. But, it's just part of a small team in headquarters in Manila. Lieutenant Colonel Gavin Ware was the commander of the operation at the time when I was there. Excellent person, excellent operator. We'd been together in Timor in 2006, and he ended up being Chief of Staff of Headquarters 1st Australian Division as well when on my next posting. And so it's not really a souvenir, but one of my performance appraisals is signed by Rich Trembath at the supervisor level and signed off by Gav Ware as a senior assessor, and the two best COs I've ever worked for. So it's nice.
So good little short deployment, and then you also assisted in the East Gippsland bushfires. So what were you doing? Was that just another short-term role?
So it was handy for me because I was already in Sale, but I just loaded my car onto the Spirit of Tasmania, and I can't remember what day it was. It was late December, or it might have even been like early January, but I just got it on there and was still in port, and I get a call saying, hey, can you come back? And I said, mate, I don't think they can take my car off. I can't, but I can get back in 2 days. So got to the other side, came back, and then Yeah, I was just the movements liaison officer out of East Sale for that period of time, mostly getting supplies into places for people who were stuck, Malakuta primarily. Yeah, and then COVID hit.
Yeah. And so is that where, during that time, does your career sort of take a pause or during COVID, or does it continue? What's happening?
So because I was so far away from my workplace, and my wife was deployed to the Middle East at the time, so it was a very busy time. I'd had a civilian business as well at that time, and it was going very, very well, like far better than we could even have imagined. But I mean, after a year in lockdown, it was in Victoria. Yeah, it was pretty tough, right? The kids only did about 50 days of school that year, and then moving on to my next posting, I was posted to 2nd 30th Training Group in Malaysia, and so we just got out of quarantine when we got to Malaysia, and on arrival we had to go into this hotel quarantine, and they knew we had 2 kids, right? And so we get shown into this hotel accommodation that we're there for 2 weeks, and he opens it up. I was like, there's only 1 bed and there's 4 of us, and he goes, yeah, but sir, it's a king size. I was like, okay, maybe that's how you do it in Malaysia. But 4 of us weren't going to be sleeping in a bed for a couple of weeks. So and then as soon as we got out of quarantine in Malaysia, in KL, went up to Penang. We were there for about 3 days, and then bang, lockdown in Malaysia and then that year the kids only got to do 20 days at school, but they got to do a lot of online learning. Defence was super good post that year in that they helped out with a tutor to help our kids get up to standard, because basically the first year was almost a complete write-off. The online year, the second year, they learnt a lot, but that first year of your kids learning where they're tracing letters and all that kind of stuff, they missed out on that. And but anyway, 230 Training Group, Malaysia, awesome posting. So 230 Training Group commands and guides the rifle company in Butterworth. So again, a very small team. I started off as a finance officer and resource officer there, but then gradually picked up further roles in minor operations, ceremonial stuff. I was very fortunate enough to go to Sadakan 6 times when I was there, so I used to take the team over there for ceremonial activities, and even being the MC there on Anzac Day, so that was pretty special. And then moved into a bit of an infrastructure development space in Malaysia as well. So overall, an amazing 3 years, and just an amazing opportunity to be able to live with your family overseas.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. And you love travel, and you're doing both. You're a career
and getting paid for it.
Yeah, that's right, mate. So you're ticking all the boxes.
Yeah, it was good.
So you come back from that posting, and then, mate, what's your current role in 2025?
Yeah, so I'm currently the operations officer at AMTDU. So AMTDU is Air Mobility Training and Development Unit. It basically, anything that goes into a service aircraft, we engineering certify it. Anything that gets underslung under a rotary wing, so underneath a helicopter, we engineer and test. And anything that gets thrown out of the back of an aircraft that is not personnel, so cargo or specialist vehicles or things like that, we design the parachute systems, test it, and then after we've done it once, we just write a document of this is how it's done, and we never do the same thing twice. So once it's done, the documentation is there, and then other people do that. So I'm just the operations officer. I'm not the brains on that one.
Mate, it sounds very interesting, and that's what you're currently doing, mate. And I've got a few final questions, mate, before we finish. And mate, it's just been epic to get you on to just hear a different side of things. And as you say, you were trying, mate, to get those deployments, and
and like not everyone. For every SF operator, you've got 20 other support staff, right? But
exactly.
Whilst I did aspire to that, you can still have a very rewarding career in one of those supporting roles.
100% you can, mate. And, mate, Dave says it as well. Like, you know, and in his podcast, he said, look, I took the postings that most people shied away from, and he said that's where I got most of my deployments. And same for you, mate.
Yeah.
You ended up, you know, getting East Timor, which you were told is never going to happen, and you got your paras. So, you know, and, mate, knowing what you know now and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Yeah, absolutely, you would. Yeah, I was very good at taking advice, actually. I was pretty lucky to have good mentors when I was young. So first thing I'd say, especially to any young soldier that's out there now, is don't listen to people when they tell you to wait until you're older to have a crack at SF selection. I got told that so many times, and I was so keen, but I never ever did it. That's probably my only regret in defence, that I never had a crack. All the other things that haven't happened are out of my control, but that was within my control. Put as much into your super as you can while you're young. And for the 18-year-olds now, just be financially literate, barefoot investor, retire life ready, read a couple of books, set yourself up, and really the importance of community. I would explain that. So it doesn't have to be defence community. You know what it's like, RFS.
Yep.
It can be your church, it could be your sporting club, your footy club, whatever. But community is so important, and the people that I see that are the most happy in life are people that have those communities and that they might volunteer in places and give back.
Great advice to any young listener out there, mate, that, yeah, it is. Just be of service, and, you know, giving back is the most rewarding thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you do those things, you can live a long and happy life. And, yeah, mate, great advice. And, mate, what advice would you give to anyone who is thinking of joining the ADF?
Yeah, understand the range of jobs. So I didn't even know what the jobs were when I went in there. And then ask around and find out what jobs people are getting deployed in, what jobs there's overseas posting opportunities for, and what transferable skills there are. So a lot of people just go in wanting to be a soldier, but I would argue that if you went in as an ammunition technician right now, then you would probably get every deployment that we're going to have for the next 20 years. Or there's a whole heap of other jobs. If you're in cyber, you're always going to have an operational role. So many, there's hundreds of areas. Don't just be pigeonholed by Uncle John who says join the infantry. So that's one. Skills, knowledge, attitude is one thing that they say a lot on courses, but attitude is so important. So strive to be good at your job, but care. You really need to care. And I think for me, I know that I'm not sitting at the top of my cohort in maybe performance in some areas of as an officer, but I can tell you now I care more than most. So, and then some really kind of a funny one is Pac-Man, so the pay and conditions manual. If you read that cover to cover when you're a young fella and before you become a corporal, you will just be a gun for all your soldiers. So I see more people get out of defence because of maladministration than any other reason. So people leave organisations, and not just defence, because they're not happy with how things have been processed. So if you can be really good at administration, even if especially if you're a warfighter, then you will be a jet for your soldiers.
Absolutely. So, Finchy, looking back now, mate, with 27 years serving your country, and you're still serving now, was joining the Army still the best decision you made?
Mate, it was certainly one of the best decisions I made, even though it was spur of the moment initially. Just the friendships I've made, the skills I've been paid to develop. I've gotten some great qualifications out of it, from trade certificates to diplomas. And for me, and I know it's different for everyone, but with my wife being in defence as well, defence has offered co-location for everywhere we've been. I've been able to transfer between full-time and part-time for my whole career. So there's generally been that flexibility. They've been super accommodating, and I find them to be a really good employer. But, you know, again, I know that my experience aren't reflective of everyone in the workforce, but if you approach things with the right attitude, then I think you'll find defence is a really good career option.
Absolutely, and it's, mate, the old saying, what you put in is what you get out.
Yeah.
And if you don't put in, you don't get. And you're often, as what's the old saying? Don't be Jack, or actually get in and do your job, and things and opportunities present, and they have for you. And mate, what are your plans going forward for you, career wise, and with your family?
Yeah, so in bit over a month now, we're moving down to Albury. So
Nice.
so looking forward to that. Family's looking forward to it as well. Yeah, I don't really want to predict too much of what my future may hold, but you never know. So I always have these ideas, and you may see me working with Rod Henderson again in the future, in maybe a few more years. But my current idea that I can't get out of my head, and I'll throw it out here for the listener. So what I'd like to see something get done is a multi-user depot for emergency services. So imagine having like a whole block in a new area where you've got police, fire and ambulance all in the same place. You've got psych services, you've got physio, you've got somewhere where you can have a feed, there's accommodation, a gym, all that kind of stuff. So all in the same place, and there's a lot of facilities, like really secure areas that you need for all those jobs, and they're super expensive to put in. And if you can have all those in one place, I think that would be something that's worth pursuing if you're a local member of government. And
yeah, great.
But it's just a little thought. I have these. I have a different thought every 6 months. So in 6 months' time, you can ask me what it is. It'll be totally different. But yeah, mate, I'm looking forward to the future. Yeah, and I think that's about it, mate.
No, I think it's great that you are. Thank you for including us, like first responders, because there's nothing for us, mate, as you know.
Yeah.
There's no support for us. We get nothing.
Mate, even if they only gave a white card for mental health, that would be a massive step forward.
What, even just physio too?
Yeah, physio, right. Yeah,
right.
So, but that's the problem when you've got state organisations and then a federal organisation. So everything's all the people who work for the federal organisations, Defence and AFP, have got all those systems in place, but at a state level, it's just not there.
It's disgusting, And, mate, well, hopefully in the future, mate, something, advocacy of people like myself and you and many others that, hopefully something can come of it. So we'll see and watch this space.
Yeah,
so,
cool.
Finchy, thank you for all you do, mate, for veterans, first responders, and just the projects that you're involved in. And, mate, it's been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue and share your story. So thanks, mate.
Yeah, likewise, Adam, mate. You've been able to create a platform for so many voices that wouldn't have otherwise had a voice. And so, I think I've listened to over 100 of your podcasts. So really appreciate what you do for defence and a veteran community as well as the first responder community, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Cheers. Cheers. And I think we can go and have a beer together now, mate.
Sounds good, mate.
Sounds good. Cheers, mate.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. See you next time.